Before we begin, imagine this: a quiet janitor with long hair, a gentle voice, and arms covered in tattoos walks into a Navy SEAL training room. A young recruit laughs at him, and in just a few seconds, the entire class goes completely silent. Because the truth behind those tattoos is something no one in that room was prepared to hear. This is the story of a single-dad janitor whose past was far greater, far heavier, and far more heroic than anyone imagined. And by the time you reach the end, you'll understand exactly why one simple question changed every life in that classroom. Before we begin the full story, if you enjoy meaningful, uplifting tales like this, stories of quiet heroes, second chances, and the power of kindness, feel free to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support us so we can continue bringing you more heartwarming stories just like this one. The classroom smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet, an odd contrast to the crisp white uniforms and razor-sharp discipline of the Navy SEAL candidates sitting in neat rows. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow across faces that had been trained to reveal nothing. Yet curiosity flickered openly in their eyes as the door creaked open. He walked in. Harrison Lee moved with a quiet steadiness, the kind of presence that did not need permission to be noticed. Tall, broad-shouldered, with long, dark hair that brushed against his collar, he wore nothing resembling a military uniform, just a faded green work shirt with rolled sleeves and jeans worn at the edges. But what drew every stare wasn't the shirt. It was the tattoos, ink winding up his arms, curling across his hands, disappearing beneath the fabric like secrets trapped under skin. A janitor. That's what they'd been told. A janitor was coming in to fix a projector or something along those lines. No one expected this. The room shifted, murmurs barely restrained behind stiff postures. Lieutenant Yara Collins, the only woman in the class, sat straighter in her chair. Her dark eyes followed him with a level of interest that wasn't mocking like the others, but analytical. Curious. She had the kind of discipline that rarely let curiosity show yet. With this man, she couldn't help it. Harrison didn't even look at them. He moved to the corner, checking the projector cables with a slow, practiced motion, as if the eyes burning into his back didn't matter. His face remained indifferent, calm to the point of cold. That calmness was exactly what pushed one student too far. Blake Moreno, one of the youngest, eager to prove himself, always a little too loud, leaned back in his seat, elbowing the guy beside him. His smirk stretched across his face, like a challenge waiting to explode. Hey, Blake, called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Why so many tattoos? Single-dad janitor. A few candidates snickered. Some covered their mouths, pretending not to laugh. Others exchanged glances, men who had spent enough time in the field to know arrogance when they saw it. Yara didn't laugh. Her gaze sharpened, cutting across the room to Blake, with a warning he didn't bother to acknowledge. Harrison finally paused. He didn't turn right away. He simply straightened up the cords in his forearm, tightening beneath the ink. For a long moment, the room felt like it was shrinking, silence filling the cracks left by the nervous laughter. Then he turned, his eyes deep, steady, unreadable, locked onto Blake. There was no anger, no annoyance, just a stillness so sharp it sliced through the air, quieting the last of the laughter. Harrison's voice, when he spoke, came out low and unhurried. "You sure you want the real answer?" he asked. Blake swallowed, but the pride in him didn't allow backing down. "Yeah," he shot back, though. His voice carried a tremor. "I mean, that's a lot of ink for a janitor." A few of the candidates shifted in their seats. Something felt off wrong. They sensed it even if they couldn't put it into words. Harrison stepped forward. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate. Each step revealed more of the ink on his skin lines, symbols, Coordinates, silhouettes that weren't decorative, but weight-bearing memories pressed into flesh. As he approached, even the air seemed to steady itself, waiting. He stopped right in front of Blake. Yara held her breath. Everyone did. Harrison lifted his coffee cup to his lips, took a slow sip, and set it down on the nearest table with a soft click. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow reaching every corner of the room, he said, "Every tattoo is a story I wish I never had to remember." No one spoke. Harrison's gaze flicked momentarily to the floor, almost as if grounding himself. Then he looked back at Blake. "The first one," he continued quietly, "is for a mission where only 2 of us made it home. We were dropped in conditions no one thought we'd survive. We did. But the cost was heavier than the gear we carried." Blake's face drained of color. Someone in the back shifted uncomfortably. Yara felt her heartbeat harden in her chest. Something about the way he spoke, soft, steady, held more weight than shouting ever could. Harrison didn't elaborate. He didn't dramatize. The simplicity of his words made them land with the force of a hammer. "These tattoos aren't decorations," he said. "They're reminders, names, memories, courage that wasn't mine, but belonged to people better than me." The room went silent again this time, without any trace of laughter. The candidates looked at him differently now, not as a janitor, not as someone out of place, but as a man carrying invisible battle scars they couldn't yet understand. Yara's eyes softened. She had seen grief before, but not like this, not so controlled, so quietly endured. She suddenly felt ashamed of the faint smile she'd let slip earlier when Blake made his joke. She didn't laugh, but she hadn't defended him either. Harrison turned away from Blake, as if the moment no longer needed him. He walked back toward the projector, setting his coffee down carefully. His hands, though steady, carried a tension that anyone perceptive enough could feel. Yara was one of the perceptive ones. She leaned forward slightly, unable to stop watching him. The rest of the class sat motionless, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The atmosphere had shifted, no longer curious, no longer amused. Now it was heavy, respectful, and uncertain. Because one thing was suddenly, undeniably clear. This was no ordinary janitor. And that single question, the one that should never have been asked, was only the beginning of a truth none of them were prepared for. For several long seconds, no one moved. The tension that had crept into the room at the end of Harrison's answer lingered like dense fog settling into corners, pressing against sternums. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a kind of respect, born too quickly to make sense, the kind that unsettles more than it comforts. Harrison didn't appear bothered. He simply adjusted the strap of his tool bag and walked toward the side table, as though the exchange with Blake meant nothing more than swatting away a harmless question. But even from behind, there was something different now, something every man in the room felt but couldn't articulate. He lifted his coffee cup again, took a thoughtful sip, and set it down. The slightest tremble passed through Blake's shoulders. Yara noticed. She also noticed something else, the way Harrison's fingers lingered on the cup for a second longer than necessary, as if grounding himself. That detail, small and easily missed, sent a strange ache through her chest. Blake swallowed hard and finally looked away, unable to handle the weight of the moment he had created. The silence stretched thick as rope until Harrison finally broke it by walking directly toward the young recruit. Not in anger, not to intimidate, just a slow, steady stride that carried purpose. Blake tensed his jaw tight, ready for some kind of reprimand. But Harrison simply stopped at his desk and rested one hand casually on the back of the chair. "You know," Harrison said quietly, "when I was your age, I thought I understood the world too." Blake blinked, confused by the gentleness. "I thought I was invincible. Thought I knew everything about danger, sacrifice, loyalty. Turns out." Harrison paused, glancing down at his own arms. Life teaches those lessons in ways we never see coming. He rolled his sleeve slightly higher, revealing a tattoo that looked rougher than the rest. Not artistic, not polished, just painfully raw black lines that had clearly been done in the field under harsh conditions. This one, Harrison said, tapping the ink, wasn't done in a shop. It was done with a needle we sterilized over a fire in the mountains. No one breathed. 3 days without sleep, freezing temperatures. That night, we lost half our team. His voice stayed calm, but something underneath trembled like a door, rattling from a storm behind it. We made this mark to remember who we left behind, and to remind ourselves why we kept moving. A murmur of unease rippled through the class. Yara's throat tightened. Blake's earlier arrogance dissolved entirely. He stared at the tattoo with a kind of frightened awe, recognizing for the first time the reality behind the ink he had mocked. Harrison's eyes softened. Not pity, not condescension. Something more like understanding. "You're not the first to mistake these tattoos for something wild or reckless," he said, "but every single one has a story. Some I wish I could forget. Others I never want to lose." A rustle passed through the rows of uniforms. Even the candidates who usually held stone-faced expressions looked shaken, recalibrating all their assumptions. Yara's heart beat painfully as she watched him. Who was this man? Why was someone like him fixing projectors in a Navy training facility? Harrison turned away from Blake, giving him space to breathe again. His boots made a soft thud on the tile floor as he walked toward the front, stopping just inches from one of the maps pinned on the wall. The outline of the Pacific loomed behind him like the ghost of a memory. He touched 2 fingers gently to a point on the map that bore no markings. This, he murmured, was one of the places we were never supposed to be. The room leaned in without meaning to. No coordinates, no paperwork, no official record. Just a promise we made to each other. A promise that only some of us came home from. His fingers lingered on the map, as if he could still feel the dirt, the cold, the breath of men he once called brothers. Yara felt her breath catch. She had seen soldiers speak of missions before, but never like this. Never with such quiet, unshielded honesty. There was no bravado, no embellishment, only truth. Finally, Harrison stepped back and folded his arms loosely, an unconscious gesture that revealed even more ink, even more untold stories. "My tattoos aren't about showing off," he said. "They're how I carry the ones who didn't get the chance to." The overhead lights buzzed faintly, the only sound in the room. Blake lowered his head in shame, but before guilt could swallow him whole, Harrison added, "You asked a question. That's not a crime. Curiosity is part of learning. Just be careful with how you use it." Blake looked up, eyes wide. I'm sorry, sir. Really. Don't be sorry." Harrison shook his head gently. "Just listen. To the world, to your team, to yourself. It'll save your life someday." For the first time since the interaction began, something eased in Blake's face. Relief mixed with newfound respect. Harrison turned to leave, but Yara stood up before she realized she was moving. "Sir," she said softly. He looked at her, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. There was something in his gaze, an old fatigue, a worn-out grief, but also a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. "I'm sorry we laughed," she said, even though she hadn't joined the laughter. "We didn't understand." Harrison studied her for a moment. "Most people don't," he replied quietly. "And that's all right. Not everyone needs to carry what I carry." But then, barely noticeable, his expression softened. "You didn't laugh," he added. Yara felt her cheeks warm. "No. But I still should have said something. Maybe he said. Or maybe silence was enough." Their eyes met just for a second. but long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Something fragile. Something beginning. Harrison nodded, once then stepped back, giving the room one last glance before returning to the projector he'd been asked to fix. As he bent over the machine, the room full of SEAL candidates sat frozen, not by fear, but by the dawning awareness that they were in the presence of a man carrying shadows deeper than any mission brief could prepare them for. A janitor, they had been told. But nothing about Harrison Lee felt ordinary, and the more he revealed, the more they realized how little they knew about the silent man fixing the projector, and the ghosts he carried with him. The projector flickered to life with a soft hum, washing the front wall in a pale glow. But no one in the classroom looked at the image. Every pair of eyes drifted inevitably, irresistibly back to the man adjusting the lens with steady fingers. Something about the silence around him felt reverent, as if speaking too loudly might disturb whatever ghosts lingered in the ink carved into his skin. Harrison Lee straightened, wiped a bit of dust from his palm, then turned to leave. He might have slipped out unnoticed. He moved so quietly, so deliberately. But Yara stepped into his path before he reached the door. "Mr. Lee," she said carefully, not wanting to seem intrusive, but unable to let him go yet. "You said each tattoo has a story." She hesitated, then added more softly, "I don't think you meant for us to misunderstand you." Harrison paused. His eyes met hers, and for the first time there was something like apology in them, though not for anything he had done. "I didn't come here to teach," he said. "But maybe the lesson found you anyway." Behind Yara, the class remained silent. Blake stared at his desk, shame clinging to him like dust. Harrison glanced around at the faces, curious, uncertain, humbled. He exhaled slowly, as if wrestling with a thought. Then, without being asked again, he rolled his right sleeve higher. Gasps rippled through the room. This tattoo was larger than the rest, stretching from elbow to shoulder. A storm of lines, dark waves crashing against jagged mountains, intertwined with silhouettes of 3 men, standing in formation, faceless and shadowed. Yara's voice dropped to a whisper. What does this one mean?" Harrison rested his hand gently over the ink as if shielding it. "This one," he murmured, "is for a night we were never supposed to survive." He didn't speak theatrically. His tone stayed calm, almost too calm. But that calmness was what made every word land with weight. "We were pinned down in a canyon in Taku Province, middle of winter. Wind freezing enough to take your breath away, bullets hitting the rocks like hail." His eyes drifted past the room, seeing something far darker than the white walls around them. "We had 3 hours of ammo, 2 hours of warmth left in our bodies. The entire class held their breath. And those 3 men," he said, tracing the silhouettes inked into his arm, "they stood with me until the last second." His expression tightened barely, but enough for Yara to see a shadow cross his features. "We held the line long enough for an evac team to reach us, but only I made it out." Blake swallowed hard his earlier arrogance, now replaced by something raw and human. Respect and regret. Harrison lowered his sleeve, hiding the tattoo from view again, as if placing a curtain over the memories behind it. He turned toward Blake, not harsh, but deliberate. "You asked about the tattoos," Harrison said. "Not to be cruel, I think. Just because you didn't know better." Blake nodded timidly. I really didn't understand, sir." "No," Harrison said gently. "You didn't. But now you start to." A charged hush settled over the class. Something intangible had shifted. Harrison was no longer a stranger with a mop and toolbox. He had become a mirror, forcing each of them to confront the gap between who they thought they were and who they hoped to become. Harrison moved toward the second row of desks, stopping beside a candidate whose eyes were red-rimmed. "This," Harrison said softly, revealing another tattoo on his forearm, 2 dog tags crossed over a compass. Is for my best friend Jordan. He saved my life once. I spent the rest of my service trying to repay that debt. He tapped the compass. East is where he died. West is where I carried the news to his wife. A single tear rolled down the candidate's cheek. He wiped it quickly, embarrassed, but Harrison gave him a small nod as if to say, tears weren't weakness. Then he stepped back toward the front of the room, stopping in the same spot as earlier. His voice lowered, weighted with memory. The ink isn't about the battles, Harrison said. It's about the people. Their laughter, their fear, their courage. He closed his eyes briefly. Their absence. The candidates shifted in their seats. A couple of them clenched their fists. Even the toughest among them looked shaken, because they understood at some instinctive level that this man wasn't speaking to impress them. He was speaking because silence could no longer hold the weight alone. Yara felt her throat tighten with an emotion she hadn't expected: sympathy, gratitude, and something else. Something quieter, deeper. She watched the way Harrison's shoulders sloped with invisible burdens, the way his hands never trembled, but carried a tension only years of hardship could carve into a person. He wasn't showing off. He was surviving. Harrison, Yara said softly, using his name for the first time. He looked up, startled by the gentleness in her voice. You don't have to share anymore. Not if it hurts. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at his mouth, one that didn't reach his eyes but carried warmth nonetheless. Hurting, he said, isn't the problem. Forgetting is. The room went utterly still. Harrison exhaled and finally lowered his gaze, letting his arms fall to his sides. The tattoos disappeared beneath his sleeves once more, but their stories hung heavy in the air. People look at me and see ink, he continued. They see rebellion, or recklessness, or mistakes. He paused. But these aren't mistakes. They're promises. To remember. To keep going. To live in a way that honors the ones who can't. None of the recruits spoke. They couldn't. The moment felt too sacred to break. Even Blake, hands trembling slightly, lifted his chin and whispered, "Thank you, sir, for telling us." Harrison didn't respond immediately. He let the words settle, allowed the quiet to return to something gentler. Then he nodded, once a simple gesture, but it felt like absolution. He picked up his tool bag, ready to leave at last. But before he turned, Harrison said something that froze everyone in their seats. "Every tattoo on my body is a chapter I didn't choose to write," he said. "But I carry them, because someone has to." And just like that, he walked toward the door, leaving behind a room full of young soldiers who would never look at him or their own futures the same way again. For a moment, the classroom felt suspended in another world, one made not of white fluorescent light and military protocol, but of quiet reverence. Harrison's presence carried a weight no textbook, no drill instructor, no simulation could replicate. The recruits remained frozen in their seats even after he reached for the doorknob, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile stillness he left behind. But before he could turn the handle, the classroom door swung inward. Commander Hale walked in. His boots struck the floor with the unmistakable confidence of a man who had spent decades shaping warriors. His uniform was crisp, his medals gleaming his jaw, set in its usual stern line. Conversations typically died the moment he entered a room. Today, however, he stepped into a silence already carved by someone else. And the first person he saw was Harrison. Hale stopped mid-stride. His eyes widened, not with surprise, but with something deeper, something that flickered like recognition and disbelief, and something dangerously close to respect. Lee Hale breathed, voice dropping an octave. "Harrison Lee." The recruits blinked, confused. It wasn't the name that stunned them, it was the tone. A tone none of them had ever heard from their commander. It wasn't authority, it was reverence. Harrison straightened instinctively, a subtle shift that revealed the soldier beneath the civilian clothes. Something in his posture, something old, trained, ingrained, rose to the surface. But Harrison didn't salute, and Hale didn't expect him to. Yara stood slowly, her gaze darting between the two men. Her instincts screamed that something monumental was unfolding, something whispered about in classified briefings and behind closed doors. Commander Hale stepped closer, expression changing from shock to something far more emotional. "I wasn't sure you'd really come," Hale said quietly. So quietly the recruits had to lean forward to catch the words. Harrison lowered his eyes. "I didn't intend to stay long. You should have told me," Hale said, his voice thickening. I didn't come for recognition," Harrison interrupted gently. "Just to fix the equipment." The recruits looked around at one another. Fix the equipment. The commander of a major training program was speaking to a janitor as if he were greeting a fallen legend. Hale's next words confirmed it. Harrison Lee, the commander, said with a slow exhale, "The ghost of Taku." Every head snapped toward Harrison. Blake's jaw fell open so far it nearly hit his desk. Even the most hardened recruits blanched. Yara's heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't know the name, but the way Hale said it sent a shiver up her spine. Harrison winced. He hated that name. The ghost he never wanted to be. The past he never wanted dragged into the light. Sir Harrison murmured, "Please don't." "It's who you are," Hale said, stepping forward until they stood only a foot apart. "Those missions would have collapsed without you. You carried teams on your back. You dragged wounded men through freezing valleys. You survived conditions multiple units classified as unrecoverable." Harrison's jaw tensed. "I survived because others didn't." The classroom held its breath. Harrison rarely raised his voice, but the pain woven through his last sentence said more than volume ever could. Hale swallowed hard. His gaze softened, not the gaze of a commanding officer, but of a man witnessing someone he once believed lost forever. "You didn't just survive," Hale said. "You saved lives." Harrison didn't answer. Guilt flickered through his expression, resurfacing old wounds no words could soothe. Yara took a step forward. "Commander." Her voice was low, steady. "Who is he?" Hale turned to her slowly. "You don't know," he asked, almost incredulous. "None of you know." The recruits shook their heads. Even Blake, who had mocked Harrison minutes earlier, looked repentant and desperately curious. Harrison Lee was part of one of the most classified tactical survival units this country has ever operated, Hale said. He was known for disappearing behind enemy lines and coming back with every objective completed sometimes, with survivors no one believed could be found. A whisper broke across the room like wind through grass. Sir Yara whispered, "Why? Why did he leave?" Hale hesitated. Harrison didn't. "Because I wanted to raise my daughter," he said quietly. "Because I wanted to stop burying people. Because I wanted to remember love instead of loss." The classroom went still again. Even Hale bowed his head at that. Harrison, the commander, said firmly, "These recruits, they need to know men like you exist. That strength isn't just in muscle or gunfire. It's in endurance, in compassion, in surviving even when every reason to keep going is gone." Harrison's gaze flicked to the floor. "I'm not who I used to be." "No," Hale agreed. "You're better." That stunned Harrison. The pain in his eyes flickered, replaced momentarily by vulnerability. "You carried burdens most men never return from," Hale continued, "and you chose to live. You chose to be a father. That is strength." Blake swallowed hard, eyes glistening with guilt. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, I insulted him earlier." I didn't know who he was. Harrison turned to him, shaking his head gently. "You don't owe me anything," Harrison said. "Respect isn't about who someone used to be. It's about who they are now." That sentence hit the room like a sermon. Yara felt something inside her shift, an understanding, a quiet blooming of admiration deeper than anything she'd felt for a superior or a mentor or a legend. This wasn't admiration born of fear. It was born of humility, his and theirs. Commander Hale looked at Harrison, then at the recruits. "Well," Hale said with a faint smile, "I suppose class is dismissed. I doubt any lesson I prepared today could compete with this one." A few nervous laughs broke the tension, but most of the recruits still stared at Harrison with the awestruck silence one gives a man who carries ghosts with grace. Harrison gave a small nod to Hale, then to Yara, then finally turned toward the door again. But just before he left, Hale called after him softly, "You may have retired, Ghost." But your legacy didn't. Harrison didn't turn. He simply paused, inhaled deeply, and walked out, leaving behind a room full of soldiers who suddenly realized they had witnessed something rare. A commander bowing not to rank, not to protocol, but to a quiet hero who never sought the title. The hallway outside the classroom felt colder than it should have, its fluorescent lights humming faintly as Harrison stepped into the quiet. His boots echoed against the polished floor, a dull, steady rhythm that contrasted sharply with the storm still lingering behind him. He wanted to disappear, to slip away before anyone else tried to pull pieces of his past from him. But footsteps followed, fast, uncertain, and heavy with remorse. Harrison Blake's voice cracked slightly. Harrison stopped but didn't turn around at first. He inhaled, steadying himself before facing the young recruit. Blake skidded to a halt a few feet away, chest rising and falling as though he'd sprinted a mile. Blake swallowed hard, visibly struggling to find the right words. "Sir, I'm sorry for what I said earlier." "I shouldn't have." Blake Harrison interrupted softly, his tone neither sharp nor dismissive. "Just calm. You don't need to apologize again." The young man shook his head stubbornly. "No, sir. I do. Because I thought I understood the world." His voice trembled. "But I didn't understand a damn thing." Harrison regarded him quietly, letting the boy speak at his own pace. "I laughed at something I didn't understand." Blake continued, shame thick in his voice. "And I disrespected someone who's done more for this country than I ever will." "That's not the point," Harrison said gently. "You didn't know, and you weren't trying to be cruel. You were trying to be confident." Blake blinked, confused. "Why are you being kind to me?" After everything, Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes softened. "Because he said I was arrogant once too. Every young soldier is at some point. The world hasn't humbled you yet. But it will. And how you respond, that's what defines you." Blake lowered his head, fighting tears. "I don't want to be the kind of man who laughs at someone I know nothing about." "Then you won't be," Harrison replied. "We all get to choose." The simple sentence steadied Blake like a hand on his shoulder. He nodded slowly, deliberately, as though accepting a vow he didn't know he needed to take. A quiet moment passed between them, broken only when another presence emerged from the classroom. Yara Collins approached with measured steps, her posture straight, but her expression softer than her military bearing usually allowed. She watched Blake retreat down the corridor before turning her attention fully to Harrison. "You handled that well," she said. Harrison shrugged. "He's young." Still, Yara added, "You didn't humiliate him. Most veterans with your background might have put him in his place." "I don't need to put anyone in their place," Harrison murmured. "Life does a fine job of that on its own." There was a heaviness in his voice, one Yara didn't overlook. She stepped closer, not invading his space, but enough that her presence felt intentional. Earlier, she said, when the commander mentioned your name. That wasn't the whole story, was it? Harrison hesitated. She had opened a door he usually kept locked, welded shut by time and guilt. He wasn't sure he wanted to step through it. But there was something in her eyes, compassion, not curiosity, understanding, not intrusion. So he answered. No, he admitted. It wasn't. Yara waited, giving him space. Harrison rolled his sleeve up again, revealing another tattoo, one she hadn't noticed before. It was simple, a pair of footprints, small and faint, almost faded into his skin. This isn't from a mission, he said. It's from when my daughter Lucy was born. Yara's breath caught slightly, not out of shock, but out of quiet tenderness. She was premature, Harrison continued. Only a few pounds. I held her feet in the palm of my hand, and they fit like she was made from paper. A faint smile tugged at his lips, bittersweet. I told myself I'd protect her from everything, but the world had other plans. His voice lowered like a confession. When her mother died, I didn't know how to be a father. I barely knew how to be alive. The tattoos, they became a way to carry what I didn't know how to put into words. Pain, loss, memories. Yara's eyes glistened. And healing, she asked. Harrison looked at the ink again, thumb brushing against one of the footprints. Maybe he whispered. I'm still learning how. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway felt suspended in time, just two soldiers, two broken pasts, and the fragile threads of something beginning to form between them. Yara broke the silence gently. When you spoke to Blake, she said you weren't just talking to him. Harrison's eyes flicked up, startled by her accuracy. You were talking to yourself, she continued, to who you used to be. He didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed a long, weary exhale that seemed to release years of buried heaviness. My anger used to be louder, he said. My pain sharper. I let the world harden me. It took losing everything to realize that hardness wasn't strength. And now, Yara asked softly. Now. Harrison paused, as if searching for the right words. Now I try to choose softer ways to carry heavy things. Yara felt something shift inside her, something delicate but profound. She stepped closer, her gaze steady. You did more than carry them, she said. You turned them into lessons. Harrison swallowed, unexpectedly moved. I'm no teacher. Maybe not in a classroom, Yara replied. But today, you taught all of us something our training couldn't. Her words lingered like a warm echo in the cool hallway. Harrison looked away, embarrassed by the sincerity. I didn't mean to. Sometimes the best lessons aren't meant, she said. They're just lived. Harrison exhaled softly, a faint, involuntary smile forming. And Yara finally, after hours of suppressing it, smiled back. A real smile. Gentle. Human. But before the moment could settle, Commander Hale emerged from the classroom behind them. Harrison Hale called out, There's something you should know. Both turned to him. The commander's face held an expression neither of them expected, part hesitation, part responsibility. Your past is not what weighs you down, Hale said quietly. It's the guilt you haven't forgiven yourself for. The sentence cut deeper than any accusation. Harrison stiffened. Yara's eyes widened. Hale stepped closer, lowering his voice. And if you don't let someone shoulder it with you, it will swallow you whole. Harrison didn't reply. He couldn't. The weight behind the ink, the burden he had always carried alone, suddenly felt exposed, raw, and unbearably heavy. And for the first time, Harrison wondered if he was finally meeting someone who might help him carry it. The hallway had barely absorbed Commander Hale's final words when another wave of silence washed over them. Harrison stood motionless, the weight of unspoken truths pressing against his lungs. Yara glanced between the two men, one burdened by decades of scars, the other by guilt for knowing too much about them. But before anyone could speak again, something small slipped from Harrison's shirt pocket and floated gently toward the floor. A soft flutter, a thin rectangle, a tiny frame of color. It landed face up on the polished hallway tiles. Yara saw it first. She stepped forward, instinctively crouching to pick it up. But the moment her fingers brushed the glossy surface, her breath caught. It was a photograph of a little girl, 8 years old, maybe younger, when the picture had been taken. Bright eyes, hair in 2 wavy pigtails, a smile so warm it radiated innocence. She held a tiny homemade sign that read, "Go Daddy, I love you." Yara's throat tightened without warning. Harrison's entire body went still. Not the stillness of a soldier, but the stillness of a father whose heart had been exposed without permission. "That's Lucy," he said softly. Yara rose to her feet, holding the picture as if it were made of glass. "She's beautiful." Harrison took a slow breath, his eyes locked on the photo. "She's my whole world?" Commander Hale stepped back a little, giving them space. He knew the look in Harrison's eyes far too well, the mixture of love, grief, and fear that only a parent who'd walked through hell could carry. "Tell her story," Hale murmured gently. "Or at least, tell someone." Harrison hesitated, not because he didn't want to, because he didn't know if he could. But when he finally met Yara's eyes, something shifted. Her expression wasn't curiosity. It wasn't pity. It was an invitation, steady, patient, open. So he spoke. "Lucy was born early," he said. Voice quiet. "Doctors weren't sure she would make it. She was so small. I could hold her entire body with one hand." His eyes softened, remembering. Her heartbeat was weaker than a whisper. Yara felt her own heartbeat stutter. But she fought, Harrison continued. "Every hour, every breath, like she knew I needed her more than she needed me." He ran a thumb along the edge of the photograph, his touch gentle. "When her mom passed, Lucy was only 5. I was still deployed. I didn't get to say goodbye. The pain flickered again, sharp, familiar. I came home to a little girl waiting at the window with that sign, the same sign she held in the picture." Yara swallowed hard, the lump in her throat nearly unbearable. "She ran to me," Harrison said, his voice cracking just enough for her to hear it, wrapped her arms around my neck, and told me she'd been saving all her smiles for when I got home. He looked down the weight of memory, bending his shoulders. "So I quit," he said. No notice, no ceremony, no retirement speech. I walked away from everything, the medals, the missions, the ghosts, so I could be the kind of father she deserved. Silence. Raw, aching silence. Then Yara stepped closer and placed the photo back in Harrison's hand, closing his fingers gently around it. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "Every parent wishes they could protect their child like that." Harrison's jaw tightened. "I didn't just want to protect her. I wanted to be better for her, kinder, softer. Life hadn't taught me how. But you learned," Yara said. "You chose softness over the battlefield. That takes more strength than surviving war." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time that day, something inside him eased. Hale cleared his throat, but even his voice was gentler now. "Lucy changed him," he said quietly. "More than any mission could. But she was also the reason he carried so much guilt." Harrison shot him a warning glance, but Hale pressed on. "You remember what happened that winter," Hale said. "The night she woke screaming and you didn't know how to comfort her." Yara's heart clenched. Harrison closed his eyes briefly. She had nightmares for months. Lost her mom, lost her routine, lost everything familiar. I was home, but broken. Yara stepped closer. "You healed together." Harrison opened his eyes again. "Eventually. But healing isn't pretty, Lieutenant. It's not poetic. It's crying on bathroom floors. It's apologizing for things you didn't know you did wrong. It's learning how to cook pancakes because she refused to eat anything else for a week. He shook his head lightly. And it's taking a janitor job at a Navy facility because cleaning floors means I can be home when she gets off school. Yara smiled softly. That isn't weakness. That's devotion. Harrison didn't respond. He didn't have to, because when Yara gently touched the picture again, just a fingertip on Lucy's smiling face, Harrison felt something shift inside him that he hadn't felt in years. A door opening, a wall cracking, a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding finally releasing. Hale watched the exchange with a knowing expression. I told you, he said quietly. You can't carry everything alone. Harrison shot him a half-amused, half-exasperated look. You always say that. Because it's always been true, Hale replied. You just didn't have someone who could share the weight. Yara met Harrison's eyes again. She didn't promise anything. She didn't offer solutions. She didn't make soft, sentimental declarations. She simply stood there, present, steady, willing. And that alone felt like more than Harrison deserved. He slipped the picture carefully back into his shirt pocket, patting it lightly, as if reassuring himself it was still there. You must love her very much, Yara said. Harrison's lips curved just slightly, but it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. More than my own life, he said. Something warm spread across Yara's chest. Commander Hale, sensing the moment, stepped back. I'll leave you two to whatever this is, he said with a rare smile. But Harrison. Remember what I told you. Harrison nodded. Hale walked away. The hallway fell quiet again. Only two remained. Harrison slowly met Yara's gaze, her eyes steady, empathetic, filled with a kind of understanding that didn't demand anything from him, held him together in a way he hadn't expected. And for the first time in a long, long time. Harrison didn't feel alone. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the training facility, casting warm, slanted beams across the hallway floor. Dust particles drifted lazily in the light, suspended like tiny fragments of memory. Harrison stood with his back against the wall, arms folded loosely, the picture of Lucy, safe once more in his pocket. Yara remained only a few feet away, as if held there by something stronger than curiosity, something gentler, quieter, and far more human. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. Their silence was not empty, but charged with an understanding that neither expected to find today. Finally, Yara exhaled softly. You know, most people wouldn't have shared all that. Harrison's gaze dropped to the floor. Most people don't ask with kindness. She blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. I wasn't trying to pry, she said gently. I just wanted to understand you. That Harrison murmured is why I answered. He didn't smile, but there was a warmth in his eyes, a warmth she hadn't seen before, softening the lines etched by years of battle grief and responsibility. Yara took a slow step closer, lowering her voice. The way you talk about Lucy, you carry her in every breath. Harrison nodded. She kept me alive after the world tried to break me. His throat tightened as he added, because the truth is, I was broken, Lieutenant, long before I ever became a father. The admission surprised her, not because she didn't sense it, but because it was the first time he allowed himself to say it aloud. Yara crossed her arms, mirroring his stance, though her voice remained soft. You're not the only one who's been broken. Harrison looked up, meeting her eyes fully for the first time. No, he said. I don't imagine I am. The air between them shifted slightly delicately, like a curtain lifting. My dad died when I was 15, Yara said quietly. One minute he was laughing in the kitchen, the next he was on the floor. Heart failure. No warning. Her voice wavered. just once, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't understand how much strength it took to speak of such things. But Harrison noticed everything. My mom, she tried to hold everything together, but she got sick the year after. Cancer. Yara's throat tightened. She fought harder than anyone I've ever known. She made it another 5 years. And when she passed, I enlisted the week after. Harrison listened without interrupting, the empathy in his eyes deepening with every word. You became a soldier because you lost them, he said softly. In a way, Yara admitted. But also because I wanted to learn how to protect people the way I couldn't protect my family. Harrison nodded, slow, thoughtful. You turned pain into purpose. Yara let out a small, humorless laugh. Sometimes, other times, it feels like the pain turned me. Harrison's expression shifted. I know that feeling too well. Their shared silence this time wasn't heavy. It was comforting. Two people scarred differently but shaped by the same kind of aching. You know, Yara continued after a moment when Blake asked you about your tattoos. I felt this snap of judgment inside myself. She looked away, ashamed. I didn't laugh. But I thought you were someone trying to look intimidating. Harrison didn't look offended. If anything, he looked resigned. People judge what they don't understand. Happens all the time. But it was wrong, Yara insisted. I saw ink and made assumptions. I saw the hair, the posture, the silence. She shook her head. And I never imagined what was behind it. Most people don't, Harrison murmured. And that's fine. I don't need to be understood. But you deserve to be, Yara said, surprising both of them with the certainty in her voice. Harrison looked at her longer, deeper this time. Maybe, he said quietly. Maybe not. He paused, then added, but hearing you say that, it means more than you know. Another step drew them closer, though neither seemed aware of moving. Yara studied him with a kind of reverence she'd never offered another soldier, not because of rank, but because of the raw humanity he carried with such quiet dignity. You've been carrying so much alone, she whispered. So have you, he replied. The words landed between them like truth, laid gently on the table. Soft, but undeniable. Yara tilted her head. Do you ever talk to anyone about it? Harrison gave a faint, rueful smile. Talking never felt like an option. The job expects silence. The world praises the strong. And grief doesn't fit neatly into small conversations. Yara's chest tightened. I used to think the same thing she said. Until one day, I realized silence wasn't strength. It was fear wearing armor. Harrison's eyes softened, as if her words struck a place he'd boarded up long ago. She continued carefully. Maybe the armor protected you then. Maybe it kept you alive. But sometimes armor gets heavy too. Harrison exhaled a long breath that sounded like something inside him loosening. I never expected to meet someone who'd understand that. And I never expected to meet someone who made me feel less alone, Yara whispered. His gaze flicked toward her, uncertain, vulnerable. Is that what I make you feel? He asked. Yara didn't hesitate. Yes. The hallway felt smaller, warmer, as if the building itself held its breath. Harrison opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the muffled sound of recruits echoing down the corridor reminded them that the world still moved outside their moment. He stepped back a fraction, not retreating, but giving her space. Yara didn't step back. Instead, she said softly, You're not alone, Harrison. Not anymore. Not unless you choose to be. The air between them thickened with something delicate yet undeniable. A beginning, a recognition. A quiet pull neither asked for, but neither resisted. Harrison dipped his head slightly. Not a bow, not a nod, but something more intimate. A silent, thank you. Yara offered the smallest, warmest smile in return. A soldier's smile, a survivor's smile, a woman who saw not a ghost but a man learning to live again. And for the first time in years, Harrison allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to heal alone. The following week unfolded with a strange, unspoken shift in the air, subtle enough that no one commented on it, yet undeniable to those involved. Harrison returned to the training facility each morning, as he always did, dressed in the same faded work shirt, the same worn boots carrying the same quiet presence. But something was different. The recruits who once glanced through him now straightened automatically when he passed. Conversations halted not out of fear, but out of respect. A nod replaced the smirk. A quiet sir replaced casual indifference. Even Blake, who once mocked him without a second thought, stepped aside whenever Harrison approached, offering respectful, almost remorseful greetings. But the greatest change did not come from the recruits. It came from Yara. She found herself noticing things she had never paid attention to before: the way Harrison tucked his hair behind his ear when concentrating, the way he paused before answering a question, as if choosing the gentlest version of the truth, the way his hands, strong, steady, moved with surprising tenderness when repairing equipment, as though fixing broken objects gave him a small sense of purpose. Each small detail etched itself into her, little by little, like ripples touching the shore. Their conversations grew more frequent too, never planned, never forced. They happened in hallways, in empty briefing rooms outside the cafeteria during slow afternoons. Harrison spoke more now, but only to her. And Yara listened, not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper, something blooming quietly. One afternoon, the recruits were dismissed earlier than expected. The facility grew still, sunlight pouring through the west windows in glowing amber strips. Harrison was in the courtyard, repairing a malfunctioning outdoor light fixture. Yara found him there. She told herself she was simply passing by, but her feet slowed as she approached him, drawn by a gravity she no longer tried to deny. "You're working late," she said, lightly. Harrison glanced over his shoulder, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "The light keeps shorting out. If I don't fix it, someone's liable to complain." "Well," Yara teased softly. "We wouldn't want the recruits tripping over their own boots in the dark, no." Harrison agreed, but it might humble a few of them. She laughed, something she didn't do often, and something she never expected to do this easily, around a man she once underestimated. Harrison tightened the last screw, then lowered himself from the ladder. His hair caught the sunlight, turning the dark strands a muted bronze. Yara's breath tangled somewhere in her chest. He wiped his hands on a rag. "You're off duty early. Commander Hale said he didn't want to interrupt the educational value you bring to the class anymore." Her eyes glimmered with humor. "So I think he's giving the recruits space to absorb your existence." Harrison winced. "I wasn't trying to become a lesson." "But you did," Yara said softly, "and not by speaking loudly, but by being exactly who you are." She hadn't meant for the sentence to sound intimate, but it did. Harrison's gaze sharpened slightly, searching her expression for something she didn't hide. The pause between them stretched, subtle, warm, filled with the hum of something neither fully understood yet. Harrison cleared his throat lightly. "Did you need something, no?" she said, honestly. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." He blinked. It was such a simple sentence, and yet it left him momentarily breathless. People didn't check on him. They thanked him, admired him, feared him, misunderstood him, but they didn't check on him. Not since Lucy. Not since his wife. Not since life taught him that caring was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "I'm okay. Better than I've been in a long time." Yara stepped closer, her voice lowering. Because you've been talking more. Because Harrison said slowly, "I've had someone to talk to." The honesty in his tone hit her like a gentle blow. Her heartbeat quickened, not with excitement, but with a deep, quiet tenderness she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to say something to fill the moment with meaning, but the words tangled. So she asked something simpler. "Can I ask you about another tattoo?" Harrison's expression softened. "If you want. Only if you're comfortable." He nodded and slowly lifted his sleeve again, revealing a new piece she hadn't seen properly before. It was faintly colored, a sunrise, breaking over a ridge of mountains, the light filtering through clouds in delicate strokes. "This one," he said, touching the ink lightly, "is from the day Lucy turned 6. She asked me what hope looked like." He smiled faintly. I told her it looked like sunrise. Yara felt something warm spread inside her chest. "You really love her," she whispered. More than anything, he said. She saw light where I saw shadows. And now Yara asked, "Do you still see shadows?" "Not as much," Harrison admitted. "The world feels different these days." His gaze lifted to hers, steady and vulnerable. "Maybe because someone else has been helping me see the light." The words were simple, but their meaning was not. Heat rose in Yara's cheeks. She had been taught to withstand pressure, to endure hardship, to keep her emotions locked behind discipline, but Harrison's softness disarmed her in ways she didn't expect. She took another step forward, drawn by an invisible pull. "You know," she murmured, "you laugh more now." Harrison arched a brow. "I laugh. Not often," she admitted, smiling. "But when you do, it's nice." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, warmth, and something quietly growing. He shifted slightly, looking down, as if the ground suddenly held something interesting. "I don't think I even noticed." "I did," Yara said. A long silence followed, not uncomfortable, but charged with the hum of something new. The wind shifted, brushing a loose strand of hair across Yara's cheek. Without thinking, Harrison reached out. Gently, so gently, he brushed the strand back behind her ear. His fingers grazed her skin. Soft, warm, reverent. Yara inhaled sharply, not from shock, but from how instinctive, how natural the gesture felt. Harrison froze. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be," Yara whispered. Their faces were inches apart now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. It wasn't a moment born of impulse. It was born of two souls, recognizing something familiar in each other. Pain, meeting. Pain, healing. Meeting, healing. Respect becoming something deeper. Yara didn't step closer. She didn't need to. The air between them already carried the weight of every unspoken feeling. Harrison stepped back, first, not out of fear, but out of reverence. "I should finish this," he murmured, gesturing vaguely at the toolbox. Yara nodded, understanding the need to slow a moment that felt dangerously perfect. But as she walked past him, her arm brushed his gently. "See you tomorrow, Harrison." He looked up, and the quiet hope in his eyes gave her the smallest, sweetest ache in her chest. "Yeah," he said softly. "See you tomorrow." What neither of them realized yet was that tomorrow would change everything. Night descended quietly over the training facility, settling into the corners of the empty courtyard and stretching shadows across the concrete. The sky above was a deep navy peppered with stars, barely visible through the distant haze of city lights. Most of the recruits had returned to their barracks, their laughter echoing faintly before fading into silence. But Harrison stayed behind. He always stayed behind. The solitude of night felt safer than daylight. No curious eyes, no questions, just the quiet hum of the world slowing down, something he wished he could do himself. He sat on one of the wooden benches near the training field elbows, resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely. His gaze wandered across the yard, landing on small details. Most people overlooked: a flickering lamp, the soft rustle of wind through the flag, the faint creak of the old metal gate. Memories lived in the quiet. And tonight, they felt closer than usual. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, lost in thought, before footsteps approached, steady light, familiar. Harrison. He lifted his head. Yara stood a few feet away, illuminated by the soft glow of a lone lamp. She wasn't in uniform anymore, just gray workout pants and a simple black sweatshirt. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands framing her face. She looked less like a lieutenant and more like a woman searching for someone in the dark. Harrison stood reflexively. "Everything all right?" She offered a gentle smile. "I came to check if you were all right." The words struck deeper than they should have. "I'm fine," he said, but even he didn't believe it. Yara walked closer, stopping just beside the bench. "You didn't go home." "You didn't either," he countered softly. A faint laugh escaped her. Fair enough. The silence between them wasn't awkward, not anymore. It held familiarity, comfort, the kind of stillness that formed between two people beginning to understand one another. "Mind if I sit?" Yara asked. Harrison shook his head. She sat beside him, leaving just enough space to be respectful, but not enough to feel distant. For a moment, they simply watched the night. Yara's voice broke the quiet, first gentle and low. "Earlier today, before you brushed my hair back." She paused, cheeks warming slightly. "I realized something." Harrison swallowed. "What's that?" "That I haven't let myself get close to anyone in a long time," she admitted. "I didn't think I could anymore." Harrison's breath caught not from expectation, but from the vulnerability in her tone. She continued, eyes fixed on the horizon. "In the military, closeness feels dangerous. Attachments feel like liabilities. You learn to build walls without noticing." Harrison nodded slowly. "Walls keep the world out and trap you inside," she added quietly. Their eyes met, soft, searching, honest. "What about you?" Yara asked. "When was the last time you let someone in?" Harrison looked down at his hands. Years of scars, ink and calluses stared back at him. "Before my wife died," he said finally. Yara's expression softened. "You loved her very much. With everything I had," Harrison whispered. "She understood parts of me I didn't know how to explain." "And Lucy?" Yara asked gently. "She's the light that kept me moving," he said. "But a child can't hold the weight of her father's trauma." Yara nodded. "Children shouldn't have to." Harrison turned to her, something fragile in his gaze. "I stopped trying to let people in after that. It felt safer." "Does it still feel safe?" she asked. Harrison inhaled deeply. The night air tasted cold, almost sharp. "No," he admitted. "Not anymore. Not since you," he almost said. But he didn't need to. She understood. Yara shifted slightly, turning her body toward him. "Can I tell you something? Something I've never said aloud." Harrison nodded. "There's a reason I don't get close to people," she said. "When my mom was sick, I spent years preparing to lose her. And when she passed, I told myself it was better not to love too deeply. That losing people wouldn't hurt if I kept everyone at a distance." Her voice trembled, but she steadied it. "But then, you walked into that room. Quiet. Strong. Carrying so much pain with so much grace." She paused, and I saw someone who wasn't afraid to feel even when it hurt. Harrison's breath caught. "I've been afraid every day, Yara. That's the difference," she whispered. "You kept going anyway." A long silence followed, deep, heavy, and warm, the kind that only exists between two people who have stopped pretending. Harrison looked away, trying to steady the emotion constricting his lungs. But Yara reached out, not boldly, not dramatically. Just a soft, brave gesture. Her hand brushed his. Barely, tentatively. He froze. Her fingers rested lightly over his knuckles, warm and steady. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know you're not the only one learning how to open a door again." Harrison's voice came out low, rough, vulnerable. "Yara, I don't know what this is," she smiled softly. "Neither do I. But whatever it is, it doesn't feel wrong." He stared at her, at the woman who saw through him like no one had in years, at the strength she wore like armor and the tenderness she kept hidden beneath it. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his hand, letting his fingers interlace with hers. A quiet breath left her lips. His voice trembled when he spoke. "It's been a long time since someone reached for me." Yara squeezed his hand gently. "It's been a long time since someone made me want to." The night around them felt different, warmer, quieter, more intimate than the world had any right to be. The shadows no longer loomed but softened, as if making room for the small spark flickering to life between them. Harrison looked at her again, really looked, and found hope reflected in her dark eyes. "Yara," he whispered, not sure what he meant to say. Only knowing her name felt safe on his tongue. She leaned closer, not enough to break military protocol, not enough to rush anything, but enough that their foreheads almost touched. Enough to feel the warmth of a beginning neither had planned for. "Harrison," she replied just as softly, "you don't have to be alone tonight." He didn't answer. He just let the words settle into the quiet, warm space between them. And for the first time in years, the night didn't feel heavy anymore. The next morning rose with a gentleness neither of them expected. The sky glowed pale gold, streaked with soft ribbons of pink, as if the world itself had decided to offer a quieter beginning. The courtyard carried the crisp scent of dew, mingling with the sharp aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting from the cafeteria windows. Harrison arrived early, as he always did, but today his steps felt lighter, more grounded. The memory of last night lingered in him like a warm ember, steady and comforting. He hadn't slept much, but for the first time in years, the lack of sleep wasn't from nightmares. It was from replaying the soft feel of Yara's hand in his. He hadn't realized how much he missed human warmth until she offered it. He walked through the training hallway with his tool bag hanging loosely at his side. A few recruits nodded respectfully. Others stepped aside with quiet greetings. Blake offered him a tentative, grateful smile. Harrison nodded back, and Blake's face brightened in relief. Respect. Not born from fear or rank, but from truth. At the end of the hall, he saw Yara. She stood by the window, arms crossed lightly, her gaze drifting over the courtyard, where sunlight spilled across the pavement like a blessing. She wore her uniform today, sharp, crisp, unmistakably professional, but the soft smile she offered when she saw him wasn't the stiff courtesy of an officer. It was personal. "Morning," Yara said. "Morning," Harrison replied, unable to stop his own faint smile. She turned to walk beside him. "You're in early. So are you. I had a feeling you might be around." Their eyes met briefly, warm and true. But the moment broke as the recruits began filing into the classroom for their final day of training. The hum of their voices carried a nervous anticipation. Today was evaluation day. Yara and Harrison stepped inside the classroom just as Commander Hale entered from the opposite door, carrying his clipboard, with an expression that warned the students there would be no leniency today. But when Hale glanced at Harrison, something softened in his face, a subtle acknowledgement shared between two men who had seen more than they ever wished to remember. "Take your seats," Hale ordered. The recruits snapped to attention. Yara moved to her place at the side of the room. Harrison quietly shifted to stand near the projector where he had stood on the first day. Same spot. Same man. Except not the same at all. Hale paced to the front of the room. Before we begin evaluations, Lieutenant Collins has a question for our guest. Yara shot him a startled look. She had never mentioned any such thing, but Hale's eyes flicked meaningfully toward her, urging her forward. He wanted this. He wanted them to understand. Slowly, Yara stepped to the center of the room. Her gaze found Harrison naturally drawn to the steadiness he offered without even trying. She swallowed once before speaking. "Harrison," she began softly, "there's something I've been meaning to ask. Something honest." The room stilled. Harrison's pulse quickened, but his expression remained calm. "Go ahead." Yara hesitated, not from fear, but from the weight of asking something so personal in front of others. "What do all of your tattoos really mean?" she asked. Not just the missions, not just the losses, but the truth behind why you chose to carry them this way. A murmur rippled through the recruits. Harrison inhaled deeply, the question landing heavier than any before. He stepped forward slowly, his boots making steady, deliberate sounds against the tile. With each step, his gaze stayed locked on Yara's anchored, unafraid, vulnerable. When he finally spoke, his voice held no armor. "No one has ever asked me that," he said. Hale folded his arms, but did not interrupt. Harrison lifted his sleeve just enough to show a cluster of tattoos, some harsh lines, some delicate, some faded with age. These marks, he began, were never meant to impress anyone. They were never meant to intimidate or define me. He turned his arm slightly, revealing the tattoo of the sunrise, the one he had shown Yara days earlier. They started as memories. Then they became apologies. Then promises. He pointed to a small, nearly invisible symbol near his wrist, a tiny silhouette of a bird. "This one is for the first man I ever lost. He used to say his daughter loved birds, that she believed souls became wings when they left this world." He swallowed hard. "So when he fell, I marked it here, not to mourn him, but to honor the love he left behind." Several recruits bowed their heads. Another tattoo, a thin silver line, caught the light. "This one," Harrison said, "I got after my wife passed. It's not a design, it's just a line. Because that's how life felt then. One line, one direction. Forward even when I didn't want to move." Yara's chest tightened. He touched the sunrise ink again. "And this," he whispered, "is hope. The hope my daughter gave back to me every time she smiled, every time she held my face and told me it was okay to wake up." Silence thickened in the room, emotion so raw it felt almost sacred. Harrison looked at Yara, now his voice lowering. "But the truth, the real truth is that I never got these tattoos to hide the pain." He swallowed. "I got them to make sure my daughter never had to see the empty spaces war carved out of me." Yara's eyes glistened. Harrison stepped closer, not physically closing the distance, but emotionally closing it, in a way the entire room felt. "I didn't want her to look at me and see scars," he said. "I wanted her to see stories, lessons, proof that even broken men can still love fiercely." Tears pricked the edges of Yara's eyes, but she didn't look away. And now she whispered, "What do they mean now?" Harrison held her gaze. Now was the truth that frightened him. Now was the truth that healed him. "They mean," he said softly, "that even after losing so much, I'm still capable of letting someone fill the spaces I thought were gone forever." Yara's breath caught. The recruits were silent, witnessing something they didn't fully understand, yet respected deeply. And for the first time since his wife's death, Harrison did not feel guilt when his heart stirred. He felt permission. He felt possibility. He felt alive. Commander Hale spoke at last, his voice barely above a murmur. class, he said today's evaluation begins with a lesson you can't measure on paper. He stepped beside Harrison. The strongest soldier isn't the one who carries the most muscle, Hale said, but the one who carries the most truth. He looked at Harrison, then at Yara. And dares to share it. Harrison lowered his gaze, but Yara's eyes didn't leave him, because she knew the real meaning behind the tattoos was not pain. It was love stitched into skin. And now, stitched into possibility. The graduation ceremony took place 3 days later, beneath a warm afternoon sky, the kind that made flags ripple proudly and cast long, soft shadows across the parade field. Families gathered along the bleachers, their chatter a comforting mixture of pride and relief. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with sun-warmed metal from the railing. A brass band tuned their instruments. In the distance, the notes drifting like sparks of celebration. Harrison walked slowly through the crowd, Lucy's small hand wrapped around his finger. She had insisted on wearing her favorite yellow dress, the sunshine dress she called it, and her curls bounced with every excited step she took. Her eyes sparkled as she looked around at the uniformed men and women assembling in rows. "Daddy, they're so tall," Lucy whispered, awestruck. Harrison chuckled softly. "They're graduating today. They worked very hard." "Like you?" she asked. He paused. "In a different way," he said gently. "But today is their moment." Lucy nodded thoughtfully, then tugged him forward. "Can we sit close? I want to see everything." Before Harrison could answer, a familiar voice called out from nearby. "Harrison, Lucy." Yara approached her uniform, immaculate her posture, straight, her smile soft and genuine. The sunlight traced gentle highlights in her dark hair, and something inside Harrison warmed at the sight of her. Lucy brightened instantly. "Hi, Miss Yara," she chirped, running to hug her legs. Yara laughed softly, kneeling to return the embrace. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm so happy you're here." Lucy pulled back just far enough to beam up at her. "Daddy says you're in charge today." Yara's eyes flickered to Harrison for a brief, meaningful moment. "Not in charge," she said. "Just helping." Harrison felt the same warmth from the courtyard, the warmth she had brought into his life without pushing, without demanding. Quiet. Steady. Healing. "Come on," Yara said, rising gracefully. "Commander Hale saved seats for all 3 of us." As they followed her, Harrison noticed how naturally Lucy reached for Yara's hand, just as easily as she reached for his. And Yara didn't hesitate before taking it. It was a small gesture. But small gestures built futures. The ceremony began with the commanding officers marching across the field. Then came Commander Hale, carrying a folder under one arm. He spoke with pride, offering words of perseverance, unity, and courage. The recruits stood in crisp rows, their chins high, their uniforms pressed to perfection. When their names were called one by one, they marched forward to receive their certificates. The crowd applauded politely, but when Blake Moreno's name was announced, he hesitated for just half a heartbeat. His eyes flicked toward Harrison. Harrison offered him a nod, firm and encouraging. Blake's shoulders straightened, and he marched forward with renewed purpose. When he shook Commander Hale's hand, there was a gratitude in his eyes no one else could understand, but Harrison saw it clearly. Respect, humility, growth. The very things that shaped soldiers. After the last certificate was handed out, Hale closed the ceremony with a final speech, but then paused. "There is one more thing," he said, glancing toward Harrison in the crowd. Harrison frowned. "Hale," he muttered under his breath. "Don't you dare." Yara smiled faintly. Lucy looked up. "What's happening?" Daddy Harrison squeezed her hand. "I'm not sure." Commander Hale lifted the worn folder in his hand. "Today we celebrate new beginnings," he said. "But sometimes we also need to honor the ones we forgot along the way." He stepped off the stage and walked directly toward Harrison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Recruits stood straighter. Officers exchanged curious glances. Hale stopped in front of Harrison and opened the folder. Inside was an old service medal, its ribbons slightly faded, its edges worn from years of storage. But the inscription was clear: for exceptional valor. Harrison's breath caught. Hale spoke softly, but every word carried across the silent field. "This was awarded to you years ago," he said, "but you were deployed again before the ceremony. You never came home to accept it." Harrison blinked as stunned. "I don't, Hale. I don't need this." "I know," Hale replied gently, "but you deserve it." Lucy tugged Harrison's sleeve. "Daddy, it's shiny." A soft laugh escaped him, unexpected but genuine. He knelt to Lucy's level, letting her touch the medal. She smiled with wonder, tracing the edges of the ribbon with tiny fingers. "Daddy's brave," she whispered. Harrison swallowed hard. "Only because life and you made me be." When he stood, Hale pinned the medal over his chest pocket, his movements slow and respectful. When he stepped back, his eyes glistened, not with sentiment, but with the deep unspoken bond shared between men who had survived what others could not imagine. Harrison lowered his head slightly. Not a bow, just a moment of gratitude. When he looked up, the recruits applauded, loud, genuine, emotional, and the officers followed. Even the families, confused but moved, joined in. But Harrison's eyes found only one face: Yara's. Her expression held admiration, tenderness, and something more, something that made his heart tighten with a new, unfamiliar hope. After the ceremony, when most people had drifted away, Yara approached him quietly. Lucy ran off a few steps ahead, twirling in her sunshine dress. "You handled that well," Yara said. Harrison exhaled. "I didn't see it coming. He wanted to remind you of who you are." "I know who I am," Harrison said softly, looking at Lucy with a gentle smile. "A father trying his best. And a man," Yara added softly, "who deserves more than he allows himself to believe." Their eyes met again, open, vulnerable. Lucy ran back toward them and wrapped her small hands around both of theirs without hesitation. Yara glanced down, then up at Harrison. He couldn't look away. "Daddy," Lucy said brightly, "are we going to get ice cream?" Harrison laughed. "We can. If Miss Yara wants to join us." Yara's cheeks warmed. "I'd like that," she said. Harrison squeezed Lucy's hand, then Yara's more lightly, more hesitantly, but she held his firmly in return. And for the first time since the war, since loss, since the weight of ink and memory carved themselves into his skin, Harrison felt something he thought he'd lost forever. A beginning. Not a dramatic one. Not a loud one. A quiet beginning. A steady one. One built on healing, on shared wounds, on the gentle certainty that life still had warmth left to offer. As the sun dipped behind the horizon and the world softened into gold, Harrison looked at Yara, then at Lucy, then back at the open path ahead. A new chapter. He was ready. "Before you leave, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from your comments? And stories always bring this community closer together, and I read every single one of them. And if this story touched your heart, even just a little, feel free to subscribe to our channel. It's the simplest and kindest way to support us, so we can continue sharing more uplifting, meaningful stories with you. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Your presence here means more than you know. Until the next story, take care, stay safe, and may kindness always find its way back to you.